Just a note before we get started, a reminder to everyone that this is a public meeting. We are recording and live streaming this meeting. And so with that, I will look for adoption of the agenda. You've had that for a week. Does anyone have any comments or suggested changes to today's agenda?
I'd move to adopt, Mr. Chair.
Motion to adopt. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Mayor Robertson.
Second.
So by exception, does anyone wish to vote opposed to the motion to adopt the agenda? I see none. I hear none. Thank you. The motion carries. We also have the minutes of our last meeting, which was October 29th. Does anyone have any comments regarding those minutes? And if not, I would entertain a motion. Motion made, Councillor Sobel. Thank you, Bob. Is there a seconder?
I will.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. By exception, does anyone wish to vote opposed to the motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting? Hear none. I see none. Thank you. The motion carries. Okay, then let's get into agenda item 4, which is an update from HDRC on the growth and servicing plan. Of course, any of you who were with us yesterday got a firsthand exposure to a lot of the work that's being done. But I'll turn it over to Stephen, please, to present this agenda item.
Great, thank you. So we are moving at a very fast pace. So these updates are out of date by the time we actually get around to presenting them. It was written a week ago and over a week ago, and it's already out of date. But I will bring you up to date in terms of where we are. So in terms of the policy development, we are into sort of the follow-up discussion. We'll have a lot of discussion today on the growth management and efficient use of land. Sorry, not today. That was yesterday. Today we're going to talk about the components of environmentally responsible land use, which are the flood-prone areas and environmentally sensitive areas. We'll talk about economic well-being today, as well as the agricultural economy. So those ones are moving at a fairly good pace. The growth management and efficient use of land is an ongoing piece. We've had several discussions and we'll have several more. We are making progress on it. I think yesterday's session was probably one of the better ones we've had, and I think we're getting closer and getting good feedback. We do still have some ongoing policy development and water stewardship and shared services optimization that we'll be introducing to the TAG on December 21st. In terms of the engagement, and we'll go through the wrap up on the phase 2 engagement today, and then upcoming, really is as you can probably guess, is finishing up the policies. We are also making good progress on the report writing, well into the first half of the report, so everything up to the policy section is well advanced at this point, and are making good progress on that. With that, the second part of this is a schedule update, and again, it's already out of date, and we are adapting and moving as we have opportunities, and in many cases, if we're having a discussion on a topic, rather than fragmenting up our discussion, we are really moving. If we're getting momentum on something, is to keep moving on that topic, so we don't lose that momentum and start to confuse things with too many things going on at once. So really, this schedule is actually out of date already, and there were some changes in meeting dates that did affect that as well. But in general, what's happening is today, after we have the discussion on the policies that you're talking about, we are going to sit down with the TAG and address the issues that come up today. We've got a meeting on the 21st with the TAGs where we will try to get close to the finish line on the growth management, efficient use of land, put to bed the topics we're discussing today, and do the first introduction of the water stewardship and shared services optimization, with them going into a refinement stage on the 8th of January, and allowing us then by the beginning of February have final policies on that and everything else, and that will all get rolled into the report at that point. So that's it.
Thank you, Stephen. Comments or questions from committee members? Reeve, Suzanne, go ahead.
Sure, just checking that you can hear with me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, the double mic going there, sorry about that. So just to follow up on your report, thank you so much, Stephen, for that. From our position going forward, we'd like to ask if you would start to include some form of an outline or table of contents, because it was kind of hard to decode where all this stuff is fitting into what category, and new titles are coming up on several items that we're not familiar with. And so coming to the next agenda, we're just wondering if you could somehow give us an indication of the framework that we're looking at, so that it's a way for us to tie together and get an understanding of what we're looking at. And to give you an example, there's several things on here where there's a new title under, for example, urban rural difference. You've got agriculture economy. So we previously were looking at agriculture. Now we've got agriculture economy. We now have a section called economic well-being that doesn't speak to agriculture. We've got the environmentally responsible land use with some sub areas that we're just not seeing how they all fit. So the request is outline or table of contents. And
maybe that.
Okay, thank you. That would be super helpful. And then the second comment we have is just related to today. We see a number of these items, obviously, the meat of the discussion here in the policy, where quite a bit of it is still under review. And, you know, we see in your meetings that we're discussing these further. So we're just, from the county's position, we're just a bit confused as to what this means. Like, what does a proven principle mean? And that might be more of a Jordan question, but Stephen, just what we're trying to do is see when we're looking at something we may still be changing, how could we be bringing that forward to the board at this stage?
I will do a very quick answer on that, but I think that second question really is a question for Jordan. I will say that anything that, even if it's approved in principle, when we pull the entire report together, we've got to make sure all the pieces fit together. So there will be some wording changes and that sort of thing, just so that, you know, one section aligns with another section, aligns with another section, and so it's consistent. But I think the intent is that the content would not change. But Jordan, I think you're probably the better person to answer that.
Sorry, Reeve. Unfortunately, I kind of cut out right when you were asking your question, so I'm not 100% sure what the question was.
So in relation to today's items on policy, being that they're still reviewed, they're going to continue to be reviewed, and you're asking us to approve in principle. The question we have is how can we move that forward to the board if we do want some substantive change, or we have a request for a change to that? Would that happen at today's table? And also it could be at another table. So how is it that we would refer that to the board if there is something that would be substantively changed?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So, and for raising this issue. As we're bringing this forward, part of it was to ensure that the committee and the elected officials are comfortable with the general policy direction. And so that is why it is worded for approval in principle. If we see a substantive change to the wording, I would have to take a look at how we're going to bring that back, either back to the committee, or whether we would use potentially, if all the tag is agreed upon with the wording, and it's relatively substantial, there is the opportunity to use an email motion, an electronic version, so that we're not waiting for a committee date. However, we do still have, obviously, committee meetings that are in the books that we can use to discuss and approve potentially if there are substantive wording changes. If it's small wording changes, I think it would not be inappropriate to be able to take to the board, flagging what the small wording changes are and the reason for it, and then have the discussion there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suzanne. Next, Councillor Belkey. Greg, good morning, and go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you. I appreciate it. It's good to see everyone. We agree with the questions that Reeve asked. One of the issues that we have with these policies is the timing. we are, I don't know about everybody else, but we are really pressed with this timing of these policies coming a couple of days before a meeting. We need to, and as our communications person said, quality is better than quantity, or as good as quantity. I think we need to have, we don't think we do, we need to have more time here to go over these policies and make sure they're right. Approving a policy in principle, I think, is very dangerous ground. And this is a plan that's going through the region, and we're going to have to live with it without amendments for 5 years, or hopefully more than that. But the foundational policies of like a servicing plan, we haven't seen that. So we talk about servicing, shared service optimization, but we don't have a servicing plan. And we have policies that we brought up before that are non-regional from one of the biggest service providers in the region. So I think timing is one of the issues that we have where we're really having a struggle trying to keep up with this. And the materials just absolutely need to be distributed early and a lot earlier, at least optimally we'd like 10 days to be able to see these. Hoping for a response, please.
Thank you. Jordan or Stephen, do you have a response?
We would like more time too. We just don't have it. I appreciate the comment. And 10 days ago, these policies were in a very different place. If we had the time, we would certainly have them out 10 days. But and we're moving as fast as we can. We're getting them out as early as we can. This one, yes, we would have liked to have them out a little earlier, but we did have a lot of back and forth before getting them out. But Jordan, did you want to do that?
Sure. I think that there's two different issues here. One is for the issues or the policies which are being discussed today. And Reeve, I agree with you. It would have been ideal to get the update on the growth management and efficient use of land out earlier than it was on Tuesday for discussion. Having said that, the purpose of Tuesday's meeting was of Thursday's meeting was to get bring everyone up to speed on the changes that were made based on feedback, and then get further feedback, not actually make a decision on those policies at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. The only thing I could counter with there is it's really hard to give constructive criticism or good feedback without preparation. And, unfortunately, we just don't have the personnel to just say, here's your only job here. And so I thank you for the answer, and we respectfully disagree. Thanks.
Thank you, Greg. All I can say about this is that with the problems associated with COVID and the problems associated with the minister not giving us the full extension that we asked for, we're doing the very best we can to get things out to people. And by the time you as elected officials see these things, your staff has seen drafts of them. And that's, I just can't say it any different. We're doing the very best we can under what I think are some very difficult timing circumstances that the world has dealt us. Any other comments on the report we've had from Stephen? If not, I would entertain a motion to receive for information.
So moved, Mr. Chair. Peter Brown, Airdrie.
Thank you, Peter. Is there a second? Thank you, Bob. By exception, does anyone wish to vote against the motion to receive for information? Please indicate. I see nothing and hear nothing. So thank you. The motion carries. This then takes us to agenda item 5, which is the workshop number 4, What We Heard summary. Back to you, Stephen.
Great, thanks. Now, this goes back to, well, middle of October 23rd. It feels like a lifetime ago in the context of this plan. A lot has happened since then, but just a reminder that at that point we were really talking about the final scenarios, and as a result of that discussion, we did go back and do some further refinement to the final scenario that shows up in the growth management efficient use of land policies as it's now being developed. However, at that point, we went through some of the benefits of the scenario and the form of growth that that scenario encompasses, and the benefits that flow from that form of growth. We heard a number of things back, certainly on the joint planning areas. There was a desire for more information on joint planning areas, the governance and the implications around clarifications, how it affects municipal development plans and development improvements. And I have to say that those 2 points are among the some of the really key things that have been worked on over the last month and a half to 2 months. Some discussion around the shared costs and shared benefits. That's probably an item that, although we'll have some important mention in the growth plan, will probably be one of those follow-up studies that we'll be recommending goes into more detail. But certainly, we do think that the shared revenue, shared cost component, and that principle is an important one that goes forward. And there was some good discussion at the workshop, and that goes forward. Around ESA policy applied to the regional and local level, we'll have a little more discussion on that today. And we have some recommendations on environmentally sensitive areas, and we do have some decision that we're looking for from you today on that item. So we've progressed that as well. In terms of the land development control by place type, that really is at the heart of the growth management and efficient use of land. Yesterday's workshop was a good example of where that discussion is going, and continuing to go, same as the discussions around infill and redevelopment. So a lot of these things that we talked about in October have been key to our discussions over the last 6 to 8 weeks. Heard some discussion around office parks and that sort of thing. We did change our approach to employment centers as a result of some of that discussion. And really, as we move through it, a lot of that discussion we had back in October, where I think we were still in the very, very early days of policy, and it has evolved substantially since that time. We also had an external tag meeting. Not a lot of differences. There was a little bit of a different, focus perhaps, but really a lot of the same discussion. A lot of the desire for infill and density requirements that that were appropriate to the area of the region that we're talking about, a desire to have more watershed discussion, and that came up at the previous meetings as well. There was some discussion around changes in travel patterns around COVID, and there was a desire at that group to make sure we were able to add or subtract JPAs in the future, and that's something that was a topic of discussion yesterday as well. So with that, I think really the outcomes of that workshop. It was a tough workshop, and I'm not gonna lie. But I think there was some good outcomes that came, and I think we've managed to roll things in and are continuing to do that with the tags and particularly most of the topics through the growth management and efficient use of land policy, which is evolving at quite a rapid rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Comments or questions regarding workshop for what we heard summary? I see none. In that case, I would entertain a motion. Oh, Marshall. Go ahead, Marshall.
I'm not too good at this IT stuff. Just a note, our staff felt that the report accurately reflects what was heard. Just a couple things on spelling and grammar, and I just ask administration to do a quick sniff before it's forwarded to the board. There's a couple of examples on page 2 and page 4, just to kind of clean up the spelling and grammar a little bit before it hits the board.
Yeah, I don't know if that was an HDR document or a board, I think.
Look at it.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I'd be prepared to move.
Motion made to receive for information, seconded Mayor Brown. Thank you very much. By exception then, anyone wishing to vote opposed to the motion? Sorry, Jordan.
Sorry to interrupt. It's actually a motion to recommend to the board, not for information.
I'm sorry. Let me just back up here. Yes, on the agenda, we're looking for a motion to recommend to the board for approval. Marshall, that's your motion. Peter, seconded. Because this is a recommendation for approval, I'm going to deal with this motion by roll call. On the motion, Airdrie, how do you vote?
Airdrie's in favor, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Calgary, how do you vote?
Calgary's in favor, Mr. Chair.
Good morning, GC, and thank you. Chestermere, how do you vote?
In favor.
Cochrane.
Cochrane's in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Foothills.
In favor. Thank you.
Thank you. High River. No one in attendance. The vote is vacant. Okotoks.
In favor.
Thank you. Rocky View.
In favor?
Strathmore.
In favor.
Wheatland.
In favor.
Thank you. I was sure we had Craig Snodgrass with us a few minutes ago. So I'm surprised that High River did not respond. In any event, the motion carries.
I'm having issues here, Chris, but I'm in favor.
Thank you very much. Then let's move on to agenda item 6, which is the public and Indigenous engagement update. And Anne is going to give us that update. Good morning, Anne. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. So thanks very much. We have just an update on the wrap up from the engagement, the phase 2 engagement that happened through the month of November. And I also have some early themes that I'm happy to share as a verbal update. If that's of interest, we'll have that in a deck for the board next week as well. I'm just not sure where you're at on time, but I'll stick to these slides for now and then offer that verbal update if you're interested. So just a reminder of the phase 2 engagement goal, that our focus was on informing the public about the proposed scenario and then gathering some input for the implementation to contribute to the policy development. So we weren't asking people to approve what was happening. We wanted them to come to the site, get informed about what was being proposed, and then to help us move towards the how, that implementation phase. We had the online engagement site open for about 3 weeks. We did a virtual open house that was fairly well attended. And again, just our goal was on driving that traffic, valuing that the input that we got would be quality and sort of deeper verbatim comments rather than aiming for a really high quantity of responses. So onto the next slide of how we did. So I just want to say thank you to the municipalities and your staff. That last week of engagement, we doubled our numbers. So we had a significant push. I think we had started that week with about 700 responses, and through the municipal bodies putting that on your social media, as well as we were able to get a Facebook ad up for that last week. So that really doubled our numbers to be able to have 1,787 total visits to the site. So that was the number that we were focusing on, because that's people who are coming to the site to learn about it as our primary goal. You can see the other breakdown just of people who engaged, who spent some time looking in the tools, who filled out the survey and engaged on that front. We were expecting those numbers to be lower. So this, I'm happy with this. I'm a lot happier than I was when we were entering that last week. So I think this is a good quality. It's still lower than it was in our first round of engagement. And maybe we didn't get out soon enough. We know the Facebook ads had been a big push for us. So we did the best we could, and I'm pleased with the participation that we got. Go to the next slide. In terms of geographic distribution, so this is taken from a few different parts on the site. So we had one just open question that said, tell us where you're from. And so people might have said their specific community that they're from, or they might have said, I live in Chestermere, work in Calgary. And so they could tell us in their words where they were from, as well as the postal codes that we had. And then there's another slide as well that shows that distribution of rural and urban balance. So geographic distribution, sorry, I'll go back to that other slide just showing that we had strong participation and really strong from Foothills and Rocky View. Just want to give a thank you. I know Foothills, I think you guys set up some signs on your own in your community and not sure what you did, but it worked. So thanks very much for pushing that as well. We'll go to the next slide, which shows again, that question that Foothills had suggested on rural and urban differences for people to tell us what perspectives they were coming from or what they had their experiences with. And so we do have a decent balance, I'd say, with 57% of people with a strictly urban perspective and the rest with either rural and urban or fully rural perspectives. And then just a couple people who weren't from the region. So I'll actually go back before we, no, let's stick with this, sorry, changing my mind here. So on the First Nations and Indigenous engagement update, so we just wanted to make sure that was clear. I think I'd offered a verbal update before, but we'll have this in the formal record that we have had a meeting with the Stoney Tribal Administration as well as Chiniki and Wesley First Nation Administration. So this was with CMRB administration discussing mutual areas of interest. Economic development is a keen interest for those nations and communities, as well as conversations related to water and water use. So those relationships are now established and able to continue to engage those communities and that administration on decisions and opportunities going forward. The administration met with Siksika Nation Chief and Council in November. So thank you very much again to Strathmore and Wheatland for supporting those connections. And that was a good 45-minute conversation with Chief and Council there about the CMRB, the work that's done. The Siksika Nation has a keen interest in becoming involved and recognizing that we don't necessarily know what that looks like. So they're keen to explore and to have conversations about is this having some of their council members sit on different committees? Is it some kind of involvement with the memorandum of understanding or declaring certain areas that we would want to work together on? So I'm back and forth a bit with Councillor Wade Healy, who is the chair of Siksika's outreach team, to set up what those conversations will look like in the future. But there is a strong interest from Siksika Nation to have a stronger relationship with the CMRB and with all the municipalities within. There was some early engagement with Tsuut'ina Nation in 2019. So Chris and Jordan had met with the chief at that time. We have not met with them since. We've had some back and forth, and that outreach has gone a bit silent. So we'll continue to follow up to offer those opportunities to engage and to work together. At that time in 2019, there wasn't necessarily a strong interest in engaging at that time, but we'll continue to keep those lines of communication open and that offer on the table. So that's what I have for the slides to speak to. As I mentioned, I could offer a verbal update for the key themes that we're hearing. We had, I think, over 800 unique comments to wade through in terms of the qualitative input that people offered through the survey and the forums. So I can offer that if that's of interest, or we can table that to the formal update at the board next week.
How long would it take you to do that, Anne?
I could probably run through it in about 3 minutes.
Let's do it right now.
Okay. So from the forum, that was the discussion forums was what we were using to introduce the idea of place types and to say what was being proposed. So more master planned communities, fewer office commercial, and asking people to react and tell us what that would mean for them and their communities. Generally, there was support for the direction that was being proposed. A strong appreciation for mixed use and increasing mixed use everywhere where that made sense, as long as there was infrastructure to accompany it. So comments around septic systems in rural residential, amenities in master planning communities, that making sure there's transit in city town center, that those are developed together. So strong comments and support, I guess, for the direction that we were heading. In terms of so we asked in the survey comments on the different policy areas. And so we asked people to share what was important to them to be considered in those policy areas. So around economic well-being, that there's good transportation and transit availability, diversify businesses and industries, creating those multi-use live, work, play areas, growing up, not out, and having a balance between economic development and the need for natural and rural areas, as well as the impacts of COVID, recognizing that needs to be considered. Talking about growth management and efficient use of land, more density, less use of land, smaller environmental footprint, developing the infrastructure first, leaving rural alone is the theme that's coming out, reducing travel time and increasing walkability. Talking about environmentally responsible land use, saying that more guidelines are needed to be in place, that we need to protect natural areas and preserve biodiversity, protect water supply, that there should be a cap on growth, and having smaller footprints or more density. In terms of shared services optimization, themes are around reducing cost and duplication, having a regional transit service, leveraging what's already in existence rather than building new, having an equitable plan for costs and access, and taking a collaborative approach. And then in celebrating rural-urban differences, preserving the character of different areas that are different, promoting the unique offerings in different areas, and respecting different choices in terms of that rural and urban, the choices that people make, and having more education on different ways of life. And then water stewardship, having a cap on growth, minimizing the amount of water that's needed to be used, using gray water whenever possible, reducing wastewater and coordinating services, being more mindful of preserving ecosystems. And then we also had added a question in around diverse housing options. I think there had been a comment or suggestion that we wanted to make sure that we were asking about the diversity in housing options. So people told us that having diverse housing options encourages diverse communities. That allows for choice in urban, town, and rural. Having affordable options in all types of housing is important. Encouraging smaller footprints and more environmental building, and aging in place options, even for rural. So that is my 3-minute run through of the qualitative themes.
And that 3-minute run through will be more formalized. We'll see it in writing for the board meeting next Friday.
Yes.
Thank you. Comments or questions for Anne on anything that you've heard from her this morning? Peter, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and great work. I was kind of skeptical, as you know, on reaching out to as many people as we could, but I really want to thank you for your efforts. That's a good number, and I love the connection with the First Nations. So just appreciation there. And if I may, Mr. Chair, if you could bring this up, because I'll forget for our board meeting next week, but I think it's really important that we stress to the minister, based on item number 4's concerns from Foothills and from Rocky View. Airdrie shares some of those concerns. There's huge capacity issues right now. We heard it yesterday in our workshop from our consultant. Getting through this and just rushing it through till the time frame that's been allotted by the minister is really, it's not reasonable. It's not feasible, and it's not working. So if we can just make a note, Jordan, and just let's have this broader discussion at the board level. I know it's not applicable to this item, but I just thought it was in the top of my mind and I wanted to bring that forward. Thanks for your indulgence, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Peter. Your point is noted. Reeve Hand, Dan, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My questions to Anne regarding the engagement results and just your percentages. I'm wondering if you have the numbers broke out, the total number of urban residents and the total number of rural residents, and then kind of make us. I know it seems like semantics a little bit, but it's kind of important to me to recognize the amount of urban residents that responded based on population as compared to the amount of rural residents that responded based on population. The way this looks to me is you're getting far more engagement or engagement input from rural residents, but it's hard to tell exactly how many. Again, maybe semantics to some, but that information would be important to I think to the rurals. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I don't have those ratios off. So within my data, so I'm not going to go. I know I don't have that number that I think I interpret you're looking for. The percentage applied. So I just want to be clear that the raw numbers. Well, I can create a number for what you're looking for. I just want to be clear that those numbers that are pulled, like the 59% Calgary, we've used the proxy of the survey responses, like when people told us where they came from, just because we made a decision up front not to make people register on the site in order to be able to participate. So we wanted to make it very accessible, and so we didn't force people to tell us where they were from. So we asked people to tell us where they were from in the survey and in the guest book. So of those people who told us, that's the proxy that we use. I can probably create something that looks at what that is relative to the population, because we'd be using that same metric for all of them. So I can try to pull that out for next week and be able to share that if that's an important stat for you.
Thank you, Anne. See what you can do.
Will do.
Any other questions for Anne or comments on what she has reported? I see none. Thank you.
Move to receive for information, Mr. Chair.
Second, Robertson, Okotoks.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Bill. By exception, does anyone wish to vote against the motion to receive for information? See none. I hear none. Thank you. The motion carries. Thank you very much, Anne.
Thanks very much, everyone.
This then takes us to agenda item 7, which is the flood-prone areas policy. And I'm going to go back to Stephen to introduce the subject. Please, Stephen.
Great, thank you. And on these 4 policies, Charlie and I will tag team on them somewhat. So on the flood-prone areas policy, back in June, the background or the policy direction or policy brief was brought to both the committee and board. The board emphasized a real desire to see the 1 in 200 year flood be recognized as the flood design standard. So we've taken that into consideration as the policies have been developed. Also, in terms of some short-term actions that were in that brief, some of them have been undertaken as part of the policy development, and the medium-term actions have been reflected also in the policy background that we're going to talk about today. Certainly, we have also recognized a desire that we've heard from committee and the board to work with the province and encourage the province to further their work on flood-prone policy, and to basically work with the province so that the regional desires to see that higher standard and higher design standard reflected also get reflected provincially in some way. I will say one of the challenges that we've had is the province is in the process of updating, as many of you know, their flood hazard mapping, their inundation mapping, and that sort of thing. And as recently as last week, when we were putting together this brief, One day we went onto the website just to double check things, and the next day we went on and it changed. More information up there and that sort of thing. So it is keep in mind, this is evolving with the province, and we now have seen some draft 1 in 200 year inundation mapping, and we have seen they have the flood hazard mapping up there. They have a new mapping application, Alberta Environment Parks does, that is helping with this. But again, it's all happening, happening in real time. So there are things that are happening, almost faster than we can keep up with. However, I don't think that really affects the policy direction that we're taking, because we were ready for any number of directions to happen, with possibly having inundation maps released before we were finished, but they're still at a draft level, so I think we're good. So really the objectives of the board are as reflected from the board meeting. That last bullet under the objectives has been added from the last time. So the minimum design standard 1 in 200 year, or 0.5% probability of flood, and you'll see that gets reflected in the policy piece as we move forward. As we know, the flood hazard mapping is in the process. Well, there is some of it is now released, some of it is not, and the draft 1 in 200 year inundation maps are available for public review now, and that the website in the footnote is up to date. I just went and double checked this morning to make sure it was all still there, because things were disappearing on us and reappearing in other places. So that is there if you want to see the 1 in 200 year inundation, the draft. When you go into their mapping application, you just click on the draft button, and it'll give you that. And then the final flood hazard mapping, which still reflects the 100 year, is also up there. So these medium-term actions, again, are unchanged from what was in the previous. I think in the previous flood brief, they were represented as possible policies. We have taken them and made them actions rather than policies. But again, this engagement, the provincial government is an important piece. So moving down to the draft policies for review. We looked at 3 potential directions we could go with the flood-prone policy. One was to continue with the interim growth plan for the policy, which is really reflecting the 1 in 100 year flood-prone area or flood hazard area. The second option was to take the IGP policy, combine it with medium-term actions, and look at further consideration. So basically, wait until all the mapping and work was done by the province, and then make a decision. The third option was really to take the IGB policy, add the higher standards, and reflect the 1 in 200 year flood event as was suggested by the board back in June. So our recommendation is C, that basically we continue with the IGP policy, but include some higher standards for flood-prone areas where new development is proposed in greenfield areas. That includes flood protection measures to the 1 in 200 year flood level, but really restricting development in the 1 in 100 year floodway. So those definitions become important. So the draft policies, I will read them out just so that we have them here. It's fairly short, and I think succinct is always better than longer. So one is the no development shall be permitted within a provincially identified floodway, with the exception of uses with no permanent buildings such as agriculture, natural areas, outdoor recreation, parks, roads, bridges, utilities, aggregate extraction, and flood mitigation infrastructure. That is the wording that comes from the interim growth plan. And by using the provincially identified floodway, that at this point is still the 1 in 100 year floodway as defined by the province. The next one we say is development in provincially identified flood fringe areas shall include flood protection measures to mitigate the risk at the 1 in 100 year flood level. So that means, again, the existing 1 in 100 year flood fringe as defined by the province. So again, we're still using those, and that is no different than the interim growth plan. Where we start to change is, notwithstanding the above, new area structure plans in greenfield areas must include protection measures to mitigate risk in provincially identified flood inundation areas at the 1 in 200 year flood level. So that brings our 1 in 200 year design flood into things. I should note that it's important that we retain both 2 and 3. There are some places where the 1 in 100 year flood fringe is actually greater than the 1 in 200 year inundation. So we don't want to, we want to make sure we're covering off both parts of that. So both the numbers 2 and 3 work in combination around protection measures in those areas. And then finally, number 4 is after updated provincial flood hazard mapping is finalized, CMRB shall work with the province of Alberta and member municipalities to investigate changing the provincial direction of the flood hazard area to the 200-year level, including an assessment of the impacts to Alberta's disaster relief program and private insurance. So those are the policies. The definitions have remained unchanged from the brief. We have added one for greenfield areas, which is very simple. It's an area for future growth located outside of the built-up area. I will point out for those who are following all of our pieces and were involved yesterday, we haven't had every version of greenfield area updated in every flood document, every policy document. Right now, it reads slightly different in the growth management efficient use of land. Those will all get consolidated as we pull all these pieces together and get that alignment between all of our policies. We will make sure that we only have a single definition for each word, and the glossary of terms will likely not sit with each policy, but rather have a glossary that applies to all policies equally. So really, in what we're looking for from committee is looking for approval in principle is recommended. If you agree, and do you agree with continuing to work with the province to achieve a higher flood standard over the longer term? With that, I turn it back to you, Mr. Chair. Chris, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Stephen. Just to focus everyone, we struggled with the question of whether this is properly worded as an approval in principle or some other wording such as directionally correct. We're just looking for the committee's feedback on whether we're on the right track or whether we're going astray. And so I'd ask you to focus on a couple of things. On page 27 of your agenda package, the 3 potential policy options are stated there, A, B, and C, and the recommended approach is C. Question, do you agree with that? And then on to pages 27 and 28, the recommended draft policies, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is where the issue of 1 in 100 and 1 in 200 come up. Do you agree with that approach? So those are the big questions put to you today. Whether you agree or not with this concept of approval in principle, we just need the feedback on those big questions. So the floor is open, and I have GC first on the list. Go ahead, GC.
Thank you. We are prepared as the City of Calgary to approve. Sorry, I see that there we go. I see that I want to note that we are prepared to approve this in principle. There are some wording changes that we feel are necessary and need to be cleaned up. But in terms of the motion that's before us and the big moves, we are supportive in principle. And I just want to clarify that minor text amendments and clearing things up, like I've got a laundry list here from my administration that I'm not going to bore you with, but it's the feeling of our water experts that's saying, 1 in 200 as opposed to 1 in 200 year is a much clearer way of defining the probability of the event we're talking about, so that there isn't an expectation that every 200 years we get one of these and not any sooner. There's a whole bunch of little minor things like that. I just want some clarity that approving this in principle, which we agree with, does not preclude our ability to just do a little bit of the fine editing that we feel is required.
Absolutely, GC. It's been recognized that the final wording of this is not necessary to be determined today. We're looking for a directional comment from this committee.
We're very, City of Calgary is very comfortable with the big moves here. I will cede the floor and listen to what my colleagues have to say.
Thank you very much, GC. Reeve, you're next. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Thank you for the comments and for the presentation. I guess the wording is a bit significant at the nuances of understanding these measurements. So I guess from the Foothills perspective, I just want to state that we understand the interest of the CMRB municipalities to do better regarding flood damage prevention, but this policy is a bit at odds with itself and with provincial measurements. So we do require clarification here and perhaps some revision in order to support it. So at this point, I just want to make a note that because the province is doing flood inundation mapping to the 1 in 200 flood and the flood hazard mapping to the 1 in 100 design flood, that there is conflict in the policy, that 1 in 100 standards for the redevelopment infill conflicts with the proposed 1 in 200 in the greenfield. So we see there being a consequence, a sort of a downstream consequence, that if the redevelopment in infills are done to that standard, they would push water downstream to the greenfield land. So that's just a go forward in what we see as resulting from some of the direction that we're heading in here. So there's a conflict there. Others may not agree with us on that, but we just wanted to make a note of it, that we don't support the policy 3 in that regard because of the measurement issue, the numbers, and the perhaps consequences of what we're doing here in policy direction. The rest of it is okay. And again, we do understand the interest to do better.
Thank you, Suzanne. Stephen, do you want to comment on that point about conflict?
Yeah, no, we recognize that there are some that could see as a conflict. I think really the intent was to look at both and have an overlay and say that, we know the flood fringe areas, it's well established, and working with that, I think we can speak to it. And what we wanted to do is just say, with the 1 in 200 business new, only applies to new greenfield ASPs. So number 2 would still apply. So if they are coincident, the number 2 would still apply in terms of the need for flood protection, but we're really adding on anything that goes outside the 1 in 100 year to the 1 in 200 year flood inundation, but only applied to greenfield areas. I think that's probably the simplest way to put it. The idea was that the 2 add together to come up with the sort of the largest area that we would be looking at.
Thank you. Next on the list, I have Mayor Robertson. Bill, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just, I guess, I certainly agree with these measures as a starting basis, in my opinion, because I think that Alberta being one of the weaker legislated flood mitigation provinces in terms of 1 in 100, when most provinces have gone above 1 in 100. But just between policies 2 and number 3. Number 2, basically, I think, is referring to redevelopment in provincially identified flood fringe areas, and only keeping that to the 1 in 100 year flood event level. So I think what we're doing is inviting disaster. We're basically saying that if that is going to be developed and kept at 1 in 100, then those events that are likely to be coming, and nothing's guaranteed into the future, will certainly have significant damage that we all pay for. Because, of course, the government steps in with publicly acquired tax dollars and helps pay for those damages and so on due to the flooding. But so I guess I would like to see number 2. If this is referring to redevelopment, why not make that the 1 in 200 year also? That's just I think that we're just inviting extra costs down the road by allowing, if that is redevelopment. Number 3 talks to development in greenfield areas. Number 2 is just provincially identified flood fringe areas. But if it's I guess I would look to Stephen for clarification. Are we talking redevelopment in number 2? And why not just require that those redevelopments, because they're rebuilding, be required to be likely another 30 centimeters above what was the 1 in 100 year flood level. That's what it comes down to, in my opinion. But I would look to Stephen for clarification between number 2 and number 3. Thank you, Chair.
I'll do the best I can. I'm not a flood expert, but I'll do the best I can, and without being able to go back to the rest of our team. But as a starting point is the 1 in 200. There is no flood hazard mapping, so no definition of floodway and flood fringe at the 1 in 200 year level. So that could be done at an ASP level or an ARP level by the developer. I would suggest that yes, development would include redevelopment. One of the challenges in redevelopment, unless you are doing a substantive redevelopment, which requires an ARP, it wouldn't come to the board anyways. So you'd have to deal with that with your own your own municipal regulations. The intent here was to try to maintain some consistency with what the province does, and then with 3 add the more stringent measures that deal with the 1 in 200 year flood inundation, because there is information available on inundation. You still need to have some work done. At an ARP or an ASP. Number 3 would only be an ASP level because it's greenfield. To confirm that sort of thing, but it would go there. But I think maybe Jamie might be the better one to provide some extra input on that.
Jamie, are you able to help us out here?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Mayor Robertson. What I would say about this in a collective way is that we know that there's lots of considerations on this topic, very complex, lots of inputs that we don't entirely have the full picture at this time. However, there is a way to do what we can in the areas that we can. And for greenfields, that is an area of opportunity. And for redevelopment and areas that are already built up, that is an area that needs further consideration. And so what's put in front of you today is really to bring together those 2 pieces with what information we have and what administration and the consultant and municipal administrations, some of them, not all, think is a workable option moving forward in this interim period where we are still consolidating all of that information. That would be what I would offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Bill, I just want to check back with you. Do you feel you've got an answer to your question?
Somewhat, yes. It's dancing around a bit. As I said, we support this. This does start down the path, not as restrictive or as far as we would like to go. But the second thing I have is, I guess, a problem with the map. The map shown at the bottom. If you look at the red area, and I know that this it's sourced from the provincial government, but what is the difference between the floodway in red, and if you look just to the left in the little brown there, that is also water. But to say that that's not part of the floodway, in my opinion, is a little ridiculous. To say that that's only flood fringe in that small area there, like basically as the floodwaters, there's no line in the floodwater that says that little area to the left isn't as near as destructive as the flood in the red. So I think that the floodway should be, as it stretches across whatever is in the land there, that should be part of the floodway. I think the picture's just misleading. That's my problem with that picture showing it there. But that's just a comment.
Stephen, are you the artist of this?
I am not. The provincial government is, but I will say that they have clear definitions around, and it's getting into the technical side of it. But the difference between the floodway and the flood fringe, and Jamie, you can help me out here if you want as well. But is actually has to do with the depth of water and speed of flow. So it does actually have a direct impact on the potential for damage. Because depth and flow are the keys to that. But Jamie, if you want to jump in and add something there, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So again, I am not a water resource engineer, so caveat there. But we do know that the floodway is defined very specifically by the hydrologic modeling that happens when you consider certain flows based on multiple historic years of input. And so that floodway, as Stephen was saying, is a certain depth and a certain speed, and it is the most destructive. But you're correct, Mayor Robertson, that yes, that area of the flood fringe can also be destructive and is wet. So that's a certainly a good point. But in the way that the province and the province of Alberta and the modeling that happens to produce these types of maps uses these types of definitions in order to illustrate where the highest risk is and where the wet portions are.
I would just very quickly add as well, in the policy, number 2 and number 4 really go together. That the current, based on what we know today around the flood hazard mapping, is today's knowledge. Number 4 is really what happens going forward, and that ability to possibly change to the 1 in 200 is it goes with number 2. Just it has to do with how much we know today.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on. Next, I have Councillor Belkey. Greg, go ahead. Sorry, Greg, if you are speaking, we cannot hear you. Greg, we're not hearing you. There must be some audio problem. So I'll come back to you, Greg.
How's that?
Oh, that's better.
There we go.
Now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Darn computers. We're kind of wondering about the legalities of going against Alberta Environment's guidelines and their policies and procedures. Have we ever got a legal opinion? I know we've addressed this 1 in 200 year idea before, and I believe it was rejected by the province. But if we were to implement a 1 in 200 year guideline, and a developer came and challenged us because the province had a 1 in 100 year, I just wonder where that would end. I agree that this number 4 is working with the province, and we've always, I think, consistently been on the side of saying this can be a very simple issue. You either go sub-regionally, and I would suggest that should Bragg Creek have a need, Rocky View could look after that need on our own, sub-regionally with, if we have to negotiate with the Sabina or Foothills, in that case, we could do that. But to have one policy that fits all. So what fits Bragg Creek might not fit High River. And the province dictates this anyway. We could live with your, on page 27 to 58B, to negotiate and still work with the province, but to stay with the interim growth plan policy, I think probably is the right way to go. The regulations are set by the province on environment, and I believe we're just trying to be redundant here. And I understand the protection, and I'm not making light of it at all. And the other thing is I don't know, again, in principle, to move ahead in principle when we have, even John Carlo mentioned some issues they have that they need to address in the future. So this policy is not ready to go ahead at this point, we would suggest. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Mayor Brown. Peter, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't know if Councillor Belkey was reading my notes, but I concur with his comments. We're not in a position to support this moving forward as of yet. A couple of specific questions, and they may have been answered, Mr. Chair, but I'm going to ask them anyway. So the 1 in 200, in our opinion, should be aspirational. obviously, we don't have the same issues that Calgary or High River or some of the lower municipalities or flood-prone municipalities have. So I'm curious if that's a consideration as it relates to the document and policy before us. That's my first question.
Not entirely sure I understand the question, but I'll try. I think the intent, the idea is that if the one municipality is affected more substantially by floods, then this will affect them more than it will another. I think that's probably the easiest and simplest answer is that it is not about one municipality or another. It's actually about the definitions of floodways, flood fringes, flood hazard areas, and inundation.
So with that, Stephen, I appreciate that, but if the focus allows this to be a policy that's more encompassing on and reflect the conditions of all municipalities, not just the flood-prone jurisdictions, is really what I'm looking for. There should be a separation in there, no?
I would actually suggest probably not, because it is to do with the natural systems and the flood prone potential, and I don't think that matters around the municipality. You already deal with the probabilities, and in one area versus another by just the straight definition of the 1 to 200 year, 1 to 100 year. That deals with the probability of it occurring in any given location. So I would suggest that it is not. There really isn't a difference between those that have a higher probability and those who have lesser probability because of the applicability. It's already covered by the probability and the straight up definition of the design flood and the probability that goes with that.
So if you and I own land right now and it's hinged on 1 in 100, we have a pretty good idea of what our costs would be as it relates to our development rights. If it goes to 1 in 200, the assumption now, again, without answering all the questions down the line, is that it's going to cost me more money to develop to these new standards. But that's not really a consideration within this policy framework. So I don't know how I can possibly support something that doesn't take that into consideration. And if I'm not making sense, I do apologize.
Maybe, Jordan, you look like you were going to speak up. No? Okay.
And I think the last thing we want to comment on is on the CMRB advocating to the province for incentives to encourage, comprehensive stormwater and flood protection against future catastrophic events. And, I would suspect by doing so, we're going to reduce the provinces. I think it was Bill or Reed Belkey. I mean, we're all paying for this over through the tax base. So at the end of the day, it would be nice to know that there is some advocacy on behalf of the CMRB to look at that perspective. And sorry if I interrupted you there, Steve.
Oh, no, that's fine. I was done.
Thank you.
Arnold. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Next on the list, I have Mayor Snodgrass. Craig, are you still with us? I don't hear him, so we'll move on. Reeve Belkey on the chat board, you've asked, is there an answer to the legality question? I'm not aware of there being a legal opinion that has yet been obtained on the question.
Okay, go again. Come back here. Okay. Now go. Where's your rollers? Inside, right? Yeah. Okay, open door.
Someone has it.
That's Mayor Snodgrass.
Can I get a ride in your jet, Mayor Snodgrass?
Sorry, I got 19 things going on at the same time here. Give me a second. Where's my list? So, I could go on forever, as you guys know. Number one, we agree with all of Mayor Bill's comments. When we start talking about the cost of development and stuff, to those of you that mentioned it, the town of High River is 14,000 people. The 2013 flood cost the provincial and federal governments over $400 million to fix this mess. So, for concern as a taxpayer, I'll be concerned about them, not that it costs a developer a little bit more money. In High River, we've done things and elevated it to 1 and 200, and it is a little bit different with greenfield and redevelopment. But it's the right thing to do, province-wide. And yes, at the end of the day, this is absolutely the government of Alberta's responsibility, and hopefully we can get there through AUMA and CMRB, but to pressure them into doing the right thing and elevating this. But at the same time, High River did our own, and we can do this regionally as well. So, when Bill mentioned the way the map looks, and that's all, up for discussion provincially as to how they design their maps. And but I just think it's important that we make the right step. And if we sit around waiting for the government to do the right thing, I don't know how long that'll take, but I think we can do better for our region and our communities as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Craig. I just wanted to comment on the point made on the chat board by Greg, asking if there's any answer to the legality question. And to my knowledge, CMRB certainly has not sought out such a legal opinion. Within any one of your municipalities, you may have already canvassed the question of whether it is legal for a municipality to have a statutory plan that enforces a different standard than the province. And I see GC waving at me. So maybe the legal answer exists, but at this moment I don't know it. I'll go to GC to help me out here.
All right. I want to jump in exactly where Mayor Snodgrass left off. I will answer the legal question, though. I am strongly of the opinion that our legal team has weighed in on this, and the legal opinion that we have at the City of Calgary is that we cannot reduce the provincial standards in a local plan, but we certainly can increase them. I think that we have gone through extensive study of this problem. I remember traipsing down to High River in the before times and spending the day doing a flood engagement. I think that the principle that we've been talking about all along is that 1 in 200 is the right thing to do for the taxpayer, for the sustainability of the region, for the sustainability of, for creating the statute necessary. I mean, the City of Calgary will not be the economic engine for Canada again until we address some of the major challenges facing it. Upstream mitigation on the Elbow River is taking place. Upstream mitigation on the Bow River is being explored. If we have a regional plan that says a 1 in 200 is the way to go, that makes that upstream mitigation, which will support not just flood mitigation deep into the future, but also drought mitigation, because we are talking about a wet reservoir. These things happen when we set the standards that say that this is what we need to do. If we're trying to, as Mayor Snodgrass says, make things a little bit more cost effective for individual development parcels at the expense of the long-term economic power of this region, the long-term sustainability of this region, and the long-term cost avoidance to taxpayers, we are making a huge mistake, and we're undermining everything that we've done so far. I will note that this is a rubber hits the road moment. I will also note that approving in principle seems like a freaky thing to do, and we're all stumbling over that. But I think it's been pretty clear that these are the principles that we want to hang our hats on, and we have the opportunity to make whatever micro refinements to clarify these things. And so, one of the things that is on my list of clarifications is I think the policy should directly reference the Elbow River and the Bow River upstream mitigation for drought, flood on both rivers, and for flood and drought on the Bow River as we solidify the policy on this plan. If we're still debating 1 in 200, I'm really shocked and saddened, because that is clearly the way to go through all the work that we've done so far. And if we're not in a position to approve that in principle, I don't know what we're doing here. Please support this in principle, and we will clear up whatever niggly little things remain.
Thank you, GC.
Chairman Scheer, before I cede the floor completely, has this been moved? Because I will move it with the understanding that we have the opportunity to move it. Then I will happily move it.
Motion to approve in principle. Is there a seconder for that motion?
Second, Robertson, Okotoks.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, we're now debating a motion that's on the floor. On the speakers list, I next have Mayor Brown. Peter, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And with all due respect to Councillor Caron and Mayor Snodgrass, no one's mitigating any of the challenges or the costs associated with the catastrophic events of 2013, and we want to do everything possible to make sure that doesn't repeat itself. But to broad brush the entire region with the same expectations when, I'll just speak to Airdrie. I mean, we're the highest elevated city in Alberta. I think we were number 1 in Canada at one time. So we don't have the same impacts as the city of Calgary. We don't have the same impacts as High River. So I don't know. I don't understand why that is not understood or appreciated from that perspective. It has nothing to do with, we're all trying to achieve the same ideals and the same expectations and the same opportunities together. But just broad brushing a stroke like this doesn't make any sense to me. I won't speak for administration, but I know we've had these conversations at the tag level. But anyway, I'm done speaking, Mr. Chair, and look forward to exercising my vote on the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Reeve Hand, before you speak, I note that you and Councillor Belke are both participating in this meeting. I would hope, from just in the interest of keeping good order in the meeting, that we try to consolidate Rocky View's county's comments into a single speaker. But for now, go ahead, Dan.
Thank you, Chris. And to speak to that, we're in separate rooms, so but we have talked about this prior. So yes, we're not going to be speaking to the same issues or saying exactly the same things. No, I want to speak to Councillor Caron, Mayor Snodgrass, Mayor Robertson's comments, and I don't think anybody is trying to diminish the effects of the 2013 floods at all. We know they're serious. We know they cost the Alberta taxpayer a lot of money. But what Rocky View is agreeing with Mayor Brown, that we can't throw a blanket over this whole deal, or we don't think that it's prudent to. Flood plans have been in the past in this county, and was dealt with through our MDPs, and again, there's just far different effects to Strathmore and Wheatland as opposed to Foothills County and High Rivers, for example. So again, I don't feel that Rockview can support this even in principle, and just we're struggling with the province has legislation and restrictions on this type of thing, and it's just another form of redundancy that the board's building into the growth plan. It's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Robertson, go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Chair. Just speaking in favor of the motion. And of course, I agree with some of the previous comments that in the past, individual municipalities were able to address some of these issues individually. The trouble is that when things are addressed individually within a municipality, then it's left to the whims of those particular, perhaps elected members that sit on those and who may or may not have particular either expertise or education in regard to, say, flood mitigation measures and so on. So by having a general policy, such as having a provincial-wide 1 in 100-year flood level at this time, makes everybody adhere to that. Now, I would agree certainly with my learned colleague from Airdrie that most of these things being, Airdrie being one of the highest municipalities in the province, these things likely will not apply in terms of flood mitigation. But at the same time, not having a provincial-wide policy then allows those individual municipalities to, if you happen to get a number of electeds on there who are perhaps, say, pro-development at the cost of perhaps public safety and so on, it allows them to ignore perhaps what might have been prudent planning for the future. Not saying that that's the case or not, but just provincial-wide policies are extremely important. Going to the 1 in 200-year flood level at a minimum. A number of provinces are much higher than the 1 in 200-year flood level. And moving forward, we don't need to spend $200 or $400 million on municipalities because of extreme flood damage into the future, which are predicted, whether it comes about or not, to be much more frequent moving into the future. So as I stated earlier, I believe this is a starting measure. I would like to see it strictly go to the 1 in 200. We have that resolution in to the AUMA. Hopefully that'll get past lobbying the provincial government to go that way, which is extremely important. But this is, I think, prudent for our region, and I urge support of this resolution moving forward to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Next, Craig, are you with us, Craig? If so, go ahead.
Yeah, I am. Thanks for a minute here. So I understand what Peter's saying, and but this policy won't affect Airdrie too much. If you're that high, you're nowhere near any of this affecting Airdrie, in my mind. But we do have Cochrane, Calgary, Okotoks, High River, Foothills County, and Rocky View County that all sit on and have waterways going through them. So this isn't, yes, it's a blanket statement, but it's a blanket statement to most of the communities within CMRB are affected by this. So I get that, passing it off to the provincial government, it's kind of an easy thing to do, but I have great reluctance that that's actually going to happen with the provincial government. And I just feel that after being through what we have been through, and I'm not playing the victim card or anything and want everybody else to go along with it, it's just what I've seen and the money that's spent and everything else, we can do better. And High River was as guilty as anybody with improper developments sitting in the wrong places. And we're still fighting it today, even after what we've been through. We still fight it with the odd developer here, but that's okay. In our minds in High River, if you do not like our standards, take a hike. go find somewhere else to build your stuff, because we're trying to be a lot more responsible for everybody involved. And I could go on, but you know my opinion, and I will be in support of this motion. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Craig. I think then, as the mover of the motion, I can go to GC to close.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I do have a question before I actually offer a formal close, although I'm not sure how necessary that is, because I think we talked about it. I think the question that I would like to ask is, can we get an answer as to how much communities that are not, impacted by our major waterways like Airdrie are going to be by this approval in principle and by a 1 in 200 year standard? Because I'm just having a hard time understanding the whole exercise of sitting around the region is to establish, the collective voice here as to what the right thing to do is. And I certainly don't think we should be advocating we're fine, so let's do the bare minimum. It should be, what do we need collectively, and what do our neighbors need? So what is on the chopping block for a community like Airdrie, given where they are in terms of elevation and removal from the major waterways? Can somebody answer that?
So perhaps Peter, over to you. GC's asking, what's the practical effect on Airdrie of this choice between 1 in 100 and 1 in 200?
Well, I don't want to go into detail because I've already basically told you my concerns around why. What I don't understand again is, we're all unique. We're all different. Councillor Caron knows that. He says it all the time. We all have different needs and wants. Well, why is it an issue? Like we do have a waterway running through our community. It's called the Nose Creek. But we weren't impacted by 13. We had minimal impact, if any. It was all internal. It wasn't anything that High River or Calgary or anyone else experienced. I just don't understand the need to broad brush. What's the point? So I put the question back to Councillor Carra.
Okay, then I will close, and I will say that the point of regional planning is to bring our voices together and strongly advocate for the best and the right outcomes, and use our collective weight to do so. Since the CMRB has been formed, we have indicated that being very thoughtful and very forward-looking about our flood mitigation is something that's very important to this board, and we've done the necessary legwork to explore both the 1 in 100 and 1 in 200 events as the benchmark. Given that the rest of Canada has moved to a best practice of 1 of 200, given that we, the affected communities in our association here in our regional board are strong advocates for 1 in 200, and given that there may be reluctance on the provincial government to take Alberta to the standard of the rest of the country, we are making the statement that this is important to this region. And while there are individual municipalities within this region who maybe aren't affected by that, there are lots of elements of this plan that apply to some, most, a couple of the members, but they're the right thing to do. And the whole point of us sitting around the regional table together is to lend our collective voices to doing the right thing. And this is very clearly the right thing at a principal level. And that's all you're being asked right now. And if there are specific things that are deeply problematic to Airdrie, we can, with this approval in principle, mitigate that in the final policy and say, with the exception of this as it pertains to these areas in the region. But as an approval in principle and as a project of us working together towards the best possible outcomes, we've done the legwork. It's clear that this is what we should do. It seems like someone who's as strong a proponent of the regional exercise we're engaged in, Peter, to be sort of, it's a discordant note from you that you're asking, why should we all be in this together? When you've made the argument that being all in this together is exactly the right thing to do. So with that, I beg you for your support of this in principle. I am very interested to make sure that we are not unduly impacting Airdrie in an unfortunate way as we do the right thing for the rest of the region, specifically those communities that are in the waterways. And please lend your voice to the right thing to do. And with that, I close.
Unfortunately, your comments have raised some other speakers wanting to speak. And as we're in committee and trying to be informal, and this is a very important topic, I am going to allow them to speak. So I'm going over to Pat.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So obviously Strathmore is one of the few communities that aren't impacted by the waterways and potential flooding at all. The river is nowhere near us, so we don't have the impact of this. So my view is that I need to really heed and pay attention to the areas that are most impacted. So I need to take my direction from Calgary, High River, Okotoks, Foothills, Cochrane, I imagine too, is impacted by this. So I don't have a lot of knowledge, but I do have a lot of respect for the communities that are impacted. So if they feel that this policy is something that could be good, it's a broad one, it's something that the board should approve in principle. It feels like, who am I to go against it when I'm not impacted? I should be paying attention and trying to protect my regional partners. And if they're on board with this, then I stand with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. And hopefully the final speaker, Craig, go ahead.
This will be it, I promise, unless GC talks again. My question, Dr. Peter, I agree with GC and what he's saying. You've been honestly my champ for supporting the CMRB and what everybody's doing here and what it means. And you've been fantastic at speaking as to how important this plan is. It does concern me that it's going to, why do we have to do it? It doesn't impact, I'm confused on that as well. I question, why should we have any number then, even 1 in 100? That's the point. If we're all going to be on our own on this, then maybe we should be advocating to just get rid of it, period. But I sure won't agree with that. I question whether 1 in 100, 1 in 200, it's broad brush. Yes, it is, but it's the right thing to do. And I think the underlying thing that we all have to ask ourselves is, are we in this for our communities directly and the future of our communities? Or are we in this because we're worried about what a developer is going to think about coming to our community? Many of you probably know, but I am not the biggest developer fan in the world. They are here to come in, they're here to make money, and they're here to leave. And whatever they build, all of us in this meeting are stuck with it. And we have to deal with it. And what one council puts in play, another council is going to have to deal with. So I go back to what Mayor Robertson said, that a lot of what High River is doing is protecting from future council decisions and negatively affecting the community based on their association with development, et cetera. So we're very cognizant of that because we've seen it happen before, and that's why we got into the mess we were in some of the areas. So that's my final comments. And again, I approve this and we're voting in favor of it. And Strathmore, Airdrie, it's the right thing to do. Thank you very much.
So I'm really wanting to finish up on this item, but I still have Marshall on the speakers list. Go ahead, Marshall.
Thank you for allowing me in at the last minute here. Chestermere will be speaking in favor of the motion and very much to Mayor Fuel's points. Understanding that Obviously, there's some municipalities that are still raising concern. Just remind everyone that this is simply in principle and to be moved to the board where there can be further discussion, direction, refinement. So Chestermere will be speaking in favor of this motion.
Thank you, Mayor Chalmers. I'm going to call the question by roll call on the motion to approve in principle the proposed policy on flood-prone areas. How do you vote, Airdrie?
Just quick comment, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. Just totally respect Mayor Snodgrass, Councillor Crow, and all of my colleagues on the board. But sometimes you disagree and you stand by your principles. So at the moment, I'm going to be voting against this policy as presented. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Calgary?
Yes, I vote in support.
Thank you. Chestermere?
In favor.
Cochrane?
We are in favor.
Thank you. Foothills?
Opposed?
Thank you. High River?
In favor.
Thank you. Okotoks?
In favor.
Thank you. Rocky View? Rocky View? I see on the chat board, Rocky View votes opposed. Strathmore?
In favor?
Thank you. Wheatland?
Opposed.
I have the count at 6-4. The motion passes. Thank you. We will move on to the next agenda item, which is number 8, but I think we will do so after a short break. Give everybody
Mr. Chairman, when we come back from the break, can you recognize me on a point of order, please? Before we begin, go back to the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we will reconvene in 5 minutes. It's currently 10 after 11, so 11:15. rejoin the meeting. So I'll call the meeting back in order. And GC, before your point, I have one of my own. To Rocky View County, although I encouraged you to consolidate your comments, I did not mean to imply that I would not recognize the two of you if you both chose to speak. So my apologies if that was interpreted incorrectly. I will recognize you both to speak, as this is a committee meeting. I just was expressing a desire that the two of you not use your number to dominate the discussion. Now, over to GC. You have a point of order.
Yeah, it was very similar to your own, Your Worship. Obviously, Mayor Nenshi and I are closely collaborative in our commitment to representing Calgary and participating in the CMRB, and deeply respectful of the transition that is taking place in Rocky View. But I do think that in the interest of time, and with the exception of exceptional, exceptions granted by the chair, it would be great if we could have a primary and a secondary, as Mayor Nenshi and I strive to do when we're both in attendance at these meetings, out of a respect for time and the other members who are here with one representative. Thank you.
So thank you. Just to clarify for everyone, our rules are slightly different at committee than they are at the board. And at committee, because this is a consolidation of what used to be the servicing committee and the land use committee, we've taken the position that two representatives from a municipality is okay. It's difficult, I got to tell you, as chair, to deal with a large number of people like that, but that's what the rules say. Two is okay at committee. When we get to a board meeting, our rules say a single representative at a time. And I know that if we were in-person meeting, sometimes people might get out of the chair and someone else would replace them in the chair, one person in the chair at a time. I'm going to try to enforce that same rule, even though we're in a virtual situation. So that's the distinction between a board meeting and a committee meeting. And at this committee meeting, to you, Greg, if I turned you off by my comment, I apologize. I certainly will recognize you to speak at this meeting.
Thank you. Your point being the amalgamation of the two committees, we had decided a long time ago to allow up to two people to come and be able to have input. I would like to stress the point that we are not trying to dominate this whatsoever. This isn't about a domination. This is trying to work together. And if we have a different opinion than someone else, that should be respected. We respect other people's opinions, and you vote accordingly, and that's fine. But we're not here to try to cause trouble. And if it offends John Carlo, I'm sorry.
It's all good, Greg.
Okay, everybody's happy. We're moving on. So we're on agenda item 8. And the topic for us here is the economic well-being policy. And I'm going to go, I see Charlie stepping forward on this one. So Charlie, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. As the tag noted in there about this draft policy, it's mercifully brief. There's some reasons for that, both practical and philosophical. First, we're talking here about what can be done in a regional growth management plan about economic growth. This is not an economic development strategy. That's a separate effort that the region may undertake at some point, but that's not a component of the growth plan per se. Second, the other reason why this is mercifully brief is that back to the point that Revo made earlier today, we have broken up these policy issues into discrete chunks for the committee and the tags and the board to be able to grapple with them, but they have to be meshed into a coherent document and coherent plan ultimately. So there are other portions of policy that will affect the economy that they aren't necessarily in this draft. So again, it's just, this is a focused effort here to look at what should be in the growth plan with respect to economic development. As I said, it's both practical and philosophical. One philosophical point, well, I guess it's practical as well, is that frankly, in general, those of us in government trying to create regulations and strategies aren't moving as fast as innovation in the private sector and in the economy. Obviously, we're living at a time where that's really true, in that we've had about 10 years of retail disruption in most parts of the world in the last 10 months. 10 years of change in what's working and not working in retail as online has zoomed upwards and as traditional retail has struggled. So it's really hard for economic policy at any time to keep up with all that. So what can be done in a growth plan with respect to economic development? Really 5 things, and we've tried to capture them in this draft document. 1, make sure that there's an adequate supply of land for economic activity. 2, try to concentrate non-freight employment in mixed-use centers and on transit as much as possible. Put the non-freight dependent employment, office, retail, and so forth, into places where people don't have to drive to get there to the greatest extent that you can. 3rd, don't undercut the viability of industrial areas with conflicting land uses. The idea of industrial sanctuaries is one that has been employed in some places. But in general, you should try to keep those industrial areas viable and avoiding the conflicts of either traffic or land use that start to erode their functionality. 4th, another transportation point, preserve transportation capacity, whether road or rail, that's needed to support freight movement. And then finally, serve industrial development with appropriate and adequate infrastructure, not just water and sewer and transportation, but also issues like electrical. As we've seen with the proliferation of data centers in the new economy that have huge electrical demands, that's an infrastructure issue. In my own experience with regional economic and land use planning, the little farm town of Hillsboro, Oregon, was not fully prepared for, but had to move aggressively to support Intel's desire to build a whole series of very large chip fabrication plants there that had obviously big impacts on infrastructure and needed a lot of land. So the draft in front of you attempts to put those ideas into draft policy. Again, there are other parts of the plan that will affect economic viability, but we think these provisions are the ones that need to be stated in this section of the draft, with the understanding that they'll be integrated into the rest. With that introduction, we can look at maybe scroll forward to the actual policy section of the draft, James, and if the committee has questions and wants to delve into those any further, we're available.
So, Charlie, you've got the draft policy set out on pages 45 and 46 of our agenda package. And then you end with two questions that HDR Council is seeking feedback on.
Yes, it would be good to go down to those questions. Thank you. Yeah, so have we missed something? Are there additional policies that ought to be added to this draft in order to make it complete? Let's see. Sorry, the version I have in front of me doesn't have the second question in it. Could you
Second
scroll
question says, should the regional transportation plan guidance be included as policy or simply referenced for future consideration?
Thank you. Yeah, obviously some of these elements are transportation related. Again, regardless of how the document is finally structured, these issues of access to the airport, make sure that industrial areas are properly served with infrastructure. We think these are economic planks, and whether they're in the transportation section or the economic section is relatively unimportant to us.
Thank you. Okay, so to the committee, are we on the right track here? Comments or questions? I see just trying to figure out the timing of the entrance onto the chat board. GC, I think you were first up there. Go ahead.
I believe I probably am as well, looking at the chat board myself. Thank you for acknowledging me, Mr. Chair. I think there's three questions that I have, and it's a very similar comment to the last one, which is largely in principle. We agree with all these planks. We actually think they're pretty good, but we've got three notes, and I think they're a little bit more than just word quibbles. And the first one would be, we're concerned that the way the policy is currently written, we are not the decision to place industrial lands will drive building more freeways rather than the decision to place industrial lands next to existing freeways. And obviously we want the latter and not the former. And so there needs to be, I think, some clarification because we don't want to end up with a converse situation. Mr. Hale, do you have a comment? Or are you willing to sort of, refine what's before us so that we're clear on that issue?
Yeah, I'm looking back at the language and thinking about that. Certainly, in principle, you're right that you ought to focus freeway-dependent industrial uses along freeways that you've already built, rather than ones that you hope to build. Again, the interaction between the regional transportation plan that will presumably follow this and the regional land use plan should be that those two fully mesh. So yeah, I think we should. Your point is well taken. The question is whether we're sufficiently strong in the policy guidance to the municipalities and to transportation providers. Worth pondering further. Thank you.
I'm a belts and braces kind of guy, so I always like to be super, super duper clear. Having said that, though, that does raise a little bit of an issue, and hopefully I'm not going to enrage my neighbors from Rocky View, but we have had disputes about exactly this issue, and there was a major non-residential land play proposed by Rocky View right adjacent to the ring road, which is a major freeway piece of infrastructure that we successfully had rejected at the provincial appeal board. And we did so on the basis that the placement of this non-residential was not just using an existing freeway, but it was unduly and without appropriate support for Calgary, impacting our entire adjacent road network in a negative way. And the appeal board found in favor of that. And we do have a lot of situations where We have a ring road now, and as you know, Mr. Hale, ring roads sort of lead towards centripetal growth trajectories. But we also have a lot of residential uses abutting our ring road in a number of places, and there needs to be a very thoughtful coordination of land uses new land uses along that roadway, because they do impact significantly existing land uses, and our ability to move traffic and move people and move goods and all of those things. So our administration is a little bit concerned that we don't want wording that will undermine the very thoughtful and very clear direction that the Provincial Appeal Board brought to bear on a subject exactly pertinent to this policy. And we need some clarification. We would need some clarifying wording that contemplated this and was thoughtful about it.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
The only thing I would add, to only a little more color commentary here is, as those of you who have been closely following the development of the growth management and efficient use of land proposed policy, of which we discussed at great length yesterday, our approach in this plan so far is to have the region be more directive about type and location when it comes to housing than we are being about jobs. That's an approach that we think makes sense to give more flexibility in economic planning to municipalities, and frankly more regional direction about type and location of housing. That's an approach. It's not a absolutely one-sided approach, but it's a balance, and we've struck the balance much more in favor of regulating where housing goes than regulating where jobs go so far in the draft process.
I agree with that. I just think that, I'm trying to sort of, I think it's a belts and braces thing with policy. And if we're willing to sort of noodle on this and refine that a little bit more, because obviously, one of the things that your analysis of our region has proven is that we are not suffering from the kinds of congestion and air quality issues associated with congestion that other parts of the world at similar scale are. And we're very laser focused on making sure that we maintain that competitive advantage. And we just want to make sure that obviously we would like industry placed next to major highway systems, but we'd also like to mitigate that with regard to existing conditions and maintaining existing competitive advantages. So if we're willing to refine the wording, we're comfortable, I think, as long as I'm getting a clear indication from you guys that we are willing to do a little bit more refining in the wording, in the policies. Okay, my final question, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, just on that, as with all of the policies we're considering today, these are directional in nature. They're not finally worded, and the final wording is yet to come. And any suggestions that any of you have about wording, please make them known in writing as soon as you can. That would be very helpful.
We absolutely will. I appreciate that, Mr. Sheard. The final question I have is, it has been, I think, a long-term opinion of the majority of this board that, economic development is critical. And I'm very appreciative of the introduction to the approach to economic development that we're taking from a land use perspective. I'm wondering why we wouldn't solidify the needs of the region and the will of this board with a statement clearly in the plan that a economic development arm is something that should be developed by the CMRB, because the City of Calgary has been and will continue to be and would be very supportive of the inclusion of that kind of wording in the regional plan. And I'm wondering I understand the scope of what we can address in the regional plan, but I'm not convinced that acknowledging the need for a regional economic development exercise or entity out at the scale of the region is something that we should also acknowledge and state as a policy goal of this board. So I'd be interested to hear what everyone has to say about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's one that everyone has weighed in on yet. I don't think I could predict that a majority of committee members would support that, but I'm happy to hear what people have to say on that. So, Greg, you're next on the list.
Before I see the chair, Mr. Scheer, I'm a little bit of a different opinion in terms of the will of this board, but I'd be happy to test that. And if people would like to weigh in, what I would propose to do is work with CMRB administration and perhaps the consultant and have an amendment when this comes before the board proper to include that policy direction.
I think that'd be a perfect way to deal with this. Thank you, JC.
Thank you.
Greg, I'm going to go to you next. I note the comment that you've made on the chat board about disagreeing about Omni. I think everyone has seen that. So you don't need to deal with that at length, but the floor is yours.
No, I thank you for that. And, the inaccurate statements, though, that get made that tend to lead us down into a rabbit hole. And now this is the second one we've seen today. These are reasons to really be aware of approving a policy in principle. These shouldn't go to the board. These should be going back to TAG. This one, we don't even have a policy. We just got a bunch of ideas. And so it's great that we have discussion on it. But I think we need to see a policy. Question that I have is on page 44 of 58. According to the regional employment forecast, when was that report written? Have we got any idea? A lot of what we're seeing and what we feel like we're seeing here is old news, and especially pre-pandemic and whatnot. And we're starting to build policies on very old information. And I'd like to kind of know when that regional employment forecast was done, and a lot of the things. Now, the idea of the growth plan objectives, enable transit, yes, but provide an effective transportation network, including transit, can work. If you have industrial, obviously you can't put a whole lot of products on a bus or a train, but we need access to transportation networks. So we've done transportation studies. We know where that is. We agree with the fact of using it as a resource to build a policy around, but it doesn't need to be included in the policy. So that's one of your questions, is should the regional transportation plan guidance be included as policy? We think that it should probably be as a reference. But again, our recommendation is to take this back to TAG and build a policy that we can critique, hopefully get it a few days in advance of a meeting, and be able to review it. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Next on the list, I have Suzanne and then Peter. So we'll go to Suzanne first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Scheer. I just wanted to speak, first of all, to thank Charlie for the presentation. And as previously noted, looking forward to that table of contents to help us out just to get an idea of where everything fits. So just to repeat on that one, thank you. And specifically, Foothills wanted to speak to the draft policy on page 45. So if you could pull that up, maybe that would be helpful. We're looking for a change in 1.1A. Again, that's on page 145. So it currently reads 1.1, municipal development plans shall, and A, confirm an adequate supply of available and serviced land for employment. So we are respectfully asking to remove and service, so those two words, because in our case, and as an example to support our request, not all employment areas will require pipe servicing. For example, industrial areas that may cater to large warehouses, commercial storage facilities, or outdoor storage of vehicles or bulk products. So again, just to repeat, we would like to have that suggestion of removing and serviced so that this policy would not prescribe us to something that we can't do. So this is contingent on us supporting this.
Thank you, Suzanne. Next, I have Mayor Brown. Peter, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. One of my questions was really already answered through GC. Thanks, Charlie, for the presentation. Everybody's going to be supporting what's in front of us. I would like to just say to DC's point that regional economic development collaboration is key to the success of our region, and I fully endorse his comments and look forward to supporting the motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and if there are no other comments, I'd be happy to be the mover of this motion.
Motion moved by Mayor Brown. Is there a seconder? Mayor Genung, thank you. Further requests to speak. I have Scott Clausen and then Mayor Chalmers. So Scott, go ahead.
Thank you. GC had mentioned regional economic development, and from the county's perspective, we've invested into our own. And when we talk about regional corridors and highways and freeway development and stuff, that in our county, the portion of land that's in the CMRB is our most developable area. And under the current structure of the CMRB and how the voting structure and everything, you could have things pulled from you that you've worked on for a long time. I'm definitely opposed to that. So that's what I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Mayor Chalmers, Marshall, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chestermere, in general, is in agreement with with what's before us. One minor change I'd like us to consider, and also, do we get can we get an answer to Rebol's suggestion in 1.18? I didn't hear a
to remove the words about and serviced?
Well, I think she was asking, I won't speak for her, but she was asking to have the word and removed. Anyway, we didn't have an answer to that. So if we can have an answer to that. Yeah, so we support in principle. Chestermere sure like to ensure that the importance of economic well-being is a focus of the board, and of course looking to the future. So economic development planning work is certainly something we need to have ingrained at the CMRB. A suggested change, I'm just looking on page 44, and the paragraph that says, the last paragraph, despite the past resilience on energy and the associated ups and downs of the market, Calgary's economy is diversifying. Would we consider replacing that with Calgary Metropolitan Region's economy is diversifying?
Thank you. I think that's a good suggestion.
Anyway, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlie, do you have any comment on Suzanne's point about removing the words and serviced from 1.1a? It's more than just a wording discussion. There's a concept and a principle involved there.
Right. I'll some comment. One, it may just be a terminology issue. When we wrote those words on the page, when we said and serviced, we weren't just thinking about water and sewer. We're also thinking about transportation, and again, potentially utilities as well. I understand the point that not all industrially designated land is serviced at the point at which it's designated. So maybe the word should, if those words are included in this portion of the drafting, maybe it should be serviceable. But the point is, there's not much use to industrial land that doesn't have utilities and transportation infrastructure. It doesn't tend to develop. That was the thinking behind the words. There's, of course, a servicing plan that's part of this ultimate document. That issue could be addressed there.
Okay.
CMRB administration may want to comment on that just as a matter of approach.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Bill next, and maybe Jordan will want to comment in a moment. Bill, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in regard to Revol's comment regarding removing service land, in particular, there is certainly a cost of having serviced land available, and then, of course, it's uneconomic to have it sit for many years with that servicing having been paid for and yet not used. So it might, perhaps we could soften the language. Our municipality is of the opinion perhaps the wording where appropriate. So confirm an adequate supply of available and service land where appropriate for employment. So just tempering that a little bit where appropriate.
Okay, that's a suggestion. Bill, thank you. I don't want to close off this discussion without at least getting a sense from the committee on GC's point about whether you would support the creation of a regional economic development entity. So I'm going to do a bit of a straw poll with you in a moment. You can think about that for now. Jordan, comments on what you've heard about the process here, particularly distinction between the servicing plan and the growth plan?
Yeah, I think that there are two issues there. It is a way to go forward. The suggestion by Mayor Brown is also workable in terms of changing it to where applicable, but we can also deal with it more on the servicing side of the plan.
As I said earlier, anyone with changes to wording, please shoot them in to Jordan as soon as you can. So a very quick and totally non-binding gut feeling straw poll here. The creation of a regional economic development entity. Thumbs up, thumbs down, yes, no. Can you just give me a sense? Hold them there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 thumbs up, couple thumbs down. Suzanne needs more info, so she's thumbs sideways. Okay, so we had a majority certainly give a thumbs up to that idea, but it's by no sense a slam dunk. And I think we need to do some more development on that. And I don't know whether that can then end up being included in the plan, but GC and Calgary, you're certainly welcome to surface that at the board.
we will prepare something for the board, an amendment. We will try and get that circulated for input. I think it's important. The people who are opposed to this, I hope to bring you on board as to why this is critically important for all of us. If we're not working regionally, we are going to get dismantled at the global level at which we're competing. How we collaborate. Hunting like a pack is what the Edmonton region is saying. Every other major economic development region in the world is moving to this model. If we do not, we will be left far behind. And I think it would be a mistake not to acknowledging the limitations of a land use and servicing plan, not to embrace those limitations and provide direction to address those limitations in a very proactive way through the development of such an entity and work together on that. I encourage everyone who's saying no to really consider that it is in yours and our best interests, and I look forward to getting you there. But we will definitely be bringing forward an amendment to test the will of the board when it comes to the board.
Excellent. Thank you for that, GC. Just want to make sure I cover everyone off before we call the question. I think, Greg, I still have you active on the speakers list, and Suzanne. So, Greg, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I think just the comments we're hearing are just grounds that we don't have a policy yet. We're sending it off to, in principle. We can't support that. The stuff that's coming out here, this regional economic development entity that is worldwide. There's a lot of other things that are going on worldwide right now that aren't healthy too. This is a removal of competition. And don't forget, we're dealing with an entity here that strongly has a policy of unicity. And we've had statements written in the paper from the City of Calgary's councillors that there will never be another cross iron mills, for example, on the boundaries of Calgary. That's not conducive to making me confident that we'll have a good economic development entity. And so I just say beware of what you're looking for here. Your autonomy is slipping away from you slowly.
Okay, well, the entity issue is going to resurface on another day. So I'll go next to Suzanne. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Thank you, and thanks for others bringing this back on the floor again here. I do hope to get a confirmation as to whether it's acceptable to us here today to remove the words "and serviced" as it's contingent upon our vote on this. I would just propose a suggestion and see if that's amenable to everyone here, because the cost to us, the significance of this is something that is the reason behind this. So the wording I would propose is, again, item A, confirm an adequate supply of available land where appropriate for employment. And that would just leave it so that it would be up to municipalities to provide that land, but with the significant list that was stated by Charlie, that there's kind of hidden things going on here, and if we could state it in a way that allows for further development, we wouldn't be stuck on this point.
So am I reading you correct? You're wishing to make an amending motion?
If that would be acceptable to the group, I would be pleased to put that forward to change item A to remove the words "and serviced" and insert "where appropriate" to hopefully capture the conversation that we were hearing.
Yes, and so as reluctant as I am to do wordsmithing at this point, I take your point that this is substantive enough that your municipality's vote depends on this wording change. So I'm going to treat it as substantive. I will accept your amending motion and look for a second. Does anyone wish to second Suzanne's motion?
Chair, just could we get the new motion read out just before and I would be willing to second it, but I'd like to have the entire new motion read out, or that new point.
Yes, it's just changing 1.1A, and Jamie is working on that right now. We're going to remove the words "and serviced" and insert words where appropriate. So that the sentence reads, confirm an adequate supply of available land for employment where appropriate. That is the amending motion. Once again, I'll ask, is there a seconder? I'm hearing none. I'm seeing none.
Mr. Chair, I believe Bill seconded.
I'm having trouble with the wording, the way it, with the intent, I realize the intent of the amendment is to remove serviced land, but it'd probably be just worded better to say confirm an available supply of available land for employment and leave it at that. That's my opinion. It becomes a little awkward with the new wording where appropriate. Because I think that
I'm very happy to do nothing further. I was just trying to capture the intent for further servicing. So if it's as simple as period after the end of for employment, I'm very happy with that.
And just removing service land.
Yes, the words
Serviced.
and serviced.
And serviced.
Yes. So I would second that motion. The amendment.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, so we have an amending motion on the floor. Is there discussion on the amending motion before I call the vote? I see none. Okay.
I believe I have an RTS in the chat, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, GC. Yes, you do. Go ahead.
You know, maybe I should have just kept my mic off. I had a huge challenge with where appropriate. It just seems like such a, and it's gone. I think appropriate land evokes serviced land or serviceable land, and maybe the use of the word serviceable. These are largely immaterial. I think that we have an agreement to wordsmith these to a point where our administrations are comfortable with them and where the board can be comfortable with them. I'm happy to support, I guess. I don't think it's that material. I think there are a number of other wordsmiths that need to take place. And if that's a hill that Foothills is going to die on, I'm happy to do my part to make sure they're not dying on any hills here today.
Thank you, GC. That's what we're all about, making sure none of us die. Yes, and I just want to reinforce your point, GC, that there are a lot of other words that perhaps could change. Once again, please get them in to Jordan if you wish to see any wording changes. But as I said before, as this one seems to cause the hinge on a vote, let's proceed with it. On the amending motion, are you in favor or opposed? Airdrie.
In favor, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Calgary.
In favor.
Chestermere.
In favor.
Cochrane.
In favor.
Foothills.
In favor.
High River. Okotoks.
In favor. Sorry, I had to get the mic on.
Rocky View.
In favor.
Strathmore.
In favor.
Wheatland.
In favor.
Thank you. Okay, we now have an amended main motion. The main motion was made quite a while ago by Peter, seconded by Jeff. So the motion to approve in principle the policy on economic well-being. On the amended main motion, how do you vote? Airdrie.
In favor, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Calgary.
I support.
Thank you. Chestermere.
In favor.
Cochrane.
In favor.
Foothills.
In favor.
High River. Okotoks.
In favor.
Rocky View,
We're opposed.
Strathmore,
In favor?
Wheatland.
Opposed.
Thank you. The motion carries. Thank you all for that discussion. That's an important item. Agenda item 9 then is agricultural economic policy. And Charlie, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one is similarly succinct. And just again, a couple of introductory comments before we talk about the policy language on the page. A great deal of what we are doing in the growth plan affects agriculture indirectly. That is by concentrating residential growth more into cities, towns, hamlets, and joint planning areas. You're going to reduce sprawl. That's one of the obvious and primary goals of this whole effort. We are taking a somewhat innovative approach here in your regional plan versus some others. That is, we are relying on using these place types and their focus into those areas as a way to reduce sprawl and produce a more compact and sustainable form of development. We're not relying on an urban growth boundary, which of course is a tool that's used in other regional policies. Nevertheless, the use of the place types model and the concentration of growth into those areas will in itself have a pretty profound effect on the preservation of agricultural land in the Calgary metropolitan region. So once again, what do we do, given that we're doing that elsewhere in the plan, i.e. in the growth management policy? What should be in the plan with respect specifically to the agriculture economy? Again, a fairly simple set of recommended policies here, which is that MDPs, municipal development plans, need to acknowledge the role of agriculture in that municipality. What is it now? What do you want it to be in the future? Where agricultural business, agricultural hubs are important to the function of your local ag industry, that should be addressed in the plan. We're interested in locally produced food, so every municipality perhaps has some opportunity to support that. There's an interest regionally in agricultural tourism, so what needs to be in local plans to address and to enhance the possibility for that once we're all going somewhere again, as opposed to being stuck in our homes having meetings this way. So again, a fairly light touch in terms of what the region would direct, more in this case, an encouragement to support the agriculture industry and identify ways where people can connect to those products, where those producers can connect to infrastructure and to larger markets. And again, if you proceed with a regional economic development plan as a follow-on to the growth plan, then obviously I think that should be a component of it. So with that, Mr. Chair, we can talk about the specific words in again, just a couple of sections of recommended draft policy that follow the preamble. The preamble's there, but the governing words start with 3.1.
Right. So 3.1 contains the meat of it, everyone. You've probably got some comments, so the floor is open. I see Suzanne and then Greg. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Thank you for the opportunity and thanks for the presentation. When Foothills County reviewed this, we saw a lot of challenges with the preamble. So my comments are related to pages 49 and 50, and that it really gives an interesting perspective here that we don't think is reflected in all the conversations background report that we put into this. So we just would ask for a rewrite of that. I have 8 examples for you. I don't know if we want to go through them all, but I'll just indicate we do have a question on this being called agricultural economy, and that's kind of new to us. So we want to understand how that fits in. When we're on page 49, the example was used in this was a 2016 ag census where you spoke to 145 farms in the city of Calgary. So we're just wondering why didn't you, for example, use just the many farms throughout the region as a whole as a suggestion? And also, of course, understanding that these were farmlands that were annexed into the city. Heading over to page 50. Top of the page, I'll just go consecutively. We have a question on the first sentence on rural environment, in that, you introduced this new concept. What is a rural environment? What do you mean by it? And is that the same as agricultural lands? In the second sentence, there's a statement saying that this development in the rural areas will contribute negatively to environment. And I guess we would state that all development would. And so we're just kind of our understanding here is that kind of a mixed message needing to be clarified here. The third sentence down, it's just not clear. There's been a connection between the intensification of agriculture, providing a closer connection between rural and urban economies, and we're just not sure about the value of that statement. Number 5 is the changing attitude of the public towards some agricultural products. We're just not sure what that really means, and farm products are sold, not left on the grocery stores shelves. And basically, what we like to say here is, we are the agriculture industry is adapting, meeting these new attitudes and so on. So we just want clarification on that one. A further point, this is a bullet point about the farm economy is oriented to large-scale exports, but basically the increasing population in urban areas suggests the need for more intensive, smaller-scale agriculture closer to the city centers. And we have a question because we don't know where the research is on this, and are we then suggesting intensive agriculture operations should be closer to urban development? So definitely question on that one. The last point is the average age of Alberta farmers has been increasing as the population and landscape continues to urbanize, and we think those are 2 separate statements. So I know that was a fair bit. It just contributes to our comment that we should rewrite this part. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, a suggestion, if I may, it might save time and trouble, and that is we do have a tag meeting this afternoon. The preamble language matters, but it's not, of course, governing. So I think these are very helpful suggestions, and my recommendation to you as a committee would be let's let the tag and contributions from folks like Revol in terms of language suggestions wrestle with the preamble language, because there's obviously still some interest in refining that, but we probably don't need to use the committee's time to go through each one of those. I appreciate you putting them on the table, Revol, and we're looking forward to discussing them with you, but maybe that would be a better forum.
Thank you. Yeah, we really want today to get an indication from the committee about whether the policies themselves are directionally correct. And again, these wording suggestions are great, but let's try to focus on the policies for now. And I'm going to go next to Greg. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We agree with everything that Revol said, and in that case, I'm prepared to make a motion to table this and send it back to the tag for future refinement. This needs a lot of work, both in the preamble and the policy. It's not reflective of the actual rural needs. And we understand that there may be an issue here where we could almost use 2 policies for agriculture, one for urban centers and one for rural. But anyway, that's my motion, and I hope for a seconder.
Motion made to move this item to tag.
I'll second that.
Revol has beat you to it and seconded. Thank you. Discussion on the motion? Well, no, let's just go to the question. On the motion to move this item to tag.
Wait a second. I have an RTS, so I'm wondering procedurally about.
Yeah. Okay.
Before we put it to a vote and send it away, can I pose my question, Mr. Chair?
Sure. I apologize. Your RTS was there before the motion, but I'm happy to deal with it. Go ahead.
Thank you. I will. We had less issue with the statements, but of course we want our agricultural specialists, the rural counties, to be completely supportive of this work as well. So if it's the will of people who are the experts on this to send it back to do some refinement, I'm certainly not going to not support that. My question, though, is that the CMRB specifically talks about, the requirements of our growth plan is that the protection of agricultural lands is there. And Mr. Hale, I think, did a good job of stating that we are not specifically going out and protecting certain lands. We are instead focusing on where growth goes and focusing that growth on transit-oriented development. I just want us to be very clear about the broader question: is what's proposed sufficient to what we're supposed to do under the statute? And if we're sending it back to TAG to have a conversation, maybe they can tackle that big one as well. But I'd also be interested to hear what anyone has to say about that.
Thank you. Well, I have to admit I'm a little bit at a loss here. I'm certainly happy to process this motion to send it to TAG, but there's been precious little, if any, commentary from committee members on the substantive question of whether these policies are correct or not. And to just send it back to TAG without any direction to TAG, any commentary from TAG, any feeling for TAG as to whether these policies are going in the right direction or not, is kind of asking TAG to do something that may not be possible. But go back to the list here. It's growing. Bill, did you want to chime in on this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just, I would agree that without giving direction to TAG as to what is wrong or what should be changed is a little negligent on our part by just sending it back. Excuse me. And of course, we're voting on the actual policy as per the agricultural economy policy, and not necessarily the preamble. So I'm just wondering about the, when I support this or not support this, I'm not voting on the preamble, in my opinion. I'm voting on what is proposed as a policy. But secondly, how will this delay? If this is going to be part of our overall land use policy, then we only have 2 months. The rubber's hitting the road here very hard. So I'm just concerned about sending it back one more time and yet trying to adhere to the March 1st deadline. So could I get a comment just from administration on how far this might set this back? Thank you.
Gordon, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I feel that we can accommodate it. As I said at the outset of the meeting, is that if we feel that the changes are substantial enough that we need to bring it back through committee, we do have that opportunity. And with the intent that by that time, we would have substantive buy-in from TAG. And so we would not anticipate having to do massive rewrites at the committee level before forwarding it on to the board. If I may, Chair, just in response to Councilor Farrar's question, do I feel that taking this approach to conservation of agricultural lands, would it meet that regulatory requirement? Yes, I do.
Thank you. Okay, we have no more people wanting to speak, and we have a motion on the floor. So I'm going to call the question on the motion, which is to refer this item to TAG. On that motion, how do you vote, Airdrie?
I'm in favor, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Calgary?
Sure.
Take that as a yes. Chestermere?
We'll vote in favor, but I just want to say I'm reading the item 1 background, number 1 background, second paragraph, and it tells me that all of the input's been received and this has been crafted with the input that's been provided. We've got the ag subcommittee, so I'm just, and I come to this meeting with the understanding that this is consistent with all the input and it's at our level now to move it forward. So I'm just, is the input that's being provided not in this policy? I mean, I'll support sending it back again, but I come to this meeting with the understanding that the ag subcommittee, they've done their work. This policy has been crafted, as it says, generally consistent with the recommendations. So I'm just a little confused. Is the work of these subcommittees, et cetera, not being included, or do we not have the right people included in these subcommittees? Because the report says that it really reflects the work that's been done. But I certainly will support our neighbors, and if they think more work needs to be done, for sure.
Okay, Marshall, I'm going to take that as a positive vote and come back after the vote has been completed to your point about consultation through the tags. Cochrane, how do you vote?
In favor.
Foothills?
In favor.
High River? Okotoks?
In favor.
Rocky View?
In favor.
Strathmore?
In favor.
Wheatland?
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries. This item will be referred back to TAG. Jordan, can you comment, or Charlie, can you comment on Marshall's concern that these things have come to this committee having already received the input from municipal staff? And here we are referring it back to municipal staff. So can you help us here?
Sure. I think part of it is in a language or a drafting. So the core of all the ideas is there, but as has been noted in other times during today's meeting, the devil is in the details. And so as in discussion with my staff, is that the core of the ideas that have been vetted through the Ag Subcommittee and have come through various discussions, it's all there. But for example, say like the preamble having been redrafted into that's a little bit more with a consultant, maybe some of the stuff was lost in translation.
Okay. Well, hopefully TAG can translate back into a form that finds support here. Okay, then let's move on. We're on agenda item 10, which is the final of the 4 policy matters we are dealing with today. This is the environmentally sensitive areas policy. And Charlie or Stephen? I see Stephen has stepped forward. Go ahead, Stephen.
Great, thank you. So this is the last of the 4 policies that we're bringing to committee today. This is based largely on the environmentally sensitive areas background study with some further discussion around the, sort of the level of application and that sort of thing. So moving as we move straight down to the policy area, this will fall under the broader area of environmentally responsible land use, so in the same set of policies as the flood-prone areas, but as a different policy in itself. What we're bringing forward, I will say there's some divergence opinion among the TAG, and it has to do with really the level of where we apply the environmentally sensitive areas and where we expect the environmentally sensitive areas to be reviewed. So there are some of the opinion that environmentally sensitive areas should be applied at the municipal development plan level so that you have a cohesive approach to the environmental systems. Others have suggested that it only be applied at the area structure plan or area redevelopment plan level because of the size of areas that are under consideration. So as it stands right now, we're recommending that area structure plans and area redevelopment plans undertake an environmental screening to identify environmentally sensitive areas as defined in the definitions, which is taken from the ESA background report, and also within 100 meters of the site boundary. So we capture, again, environmental systems don't follow ASB boundaries or municipal boundaries. So we're saying you need to take a little bit of a look outside. If something is identified, then it would move forward. We require them to be mapped. If something is identified, then it moves forward to an environmental study. I will note that there is a typo in C that should say 100 meters, not 50. And then that an environmental study, so a more detailed study, be undertaken to identify the impacts on environmentally sensitive areas and recommend mitigation measures. Our second policy says that municipal development plan should include a map or shall include a map of environmentally sensitive areas within areas designated for future growth, and that was added due to a concern about, particularly in the rural areas, the amount of area that is covered. So the intent is that the MDP doesn't have to map everything, but rather focused on areas designated for growth. And then the final one is that the CMRB compiles identified environmentally sensitive areas into a common database for the region, so that over time a database is built. With that, really we have we're looking for direction on this, and really the key part is whether the requirements should be required at the ASP, ARP level, and MDP, or only. In fact, the option 2 is probably not quite correctly written. Only the MDP, and the third option is only at the ASP level. So it's really the level of application that we're looking for direction on at this point. Thank you.
Okay, open to the floor now on the questions raised. The level, ASP or MDP or all plans, whatever, and the policy statements themselves contained at the top of page 56. Comments. The floor is open. I have Mayor Brown. Go ahead, Peter.
Thanks, Stephen. So around the policy, we have a couple of questions, and I'm sure you've already heard them from our TAG representatives. But so we believe that it does not speak to required or recommended measures for individual municipality use to protect the environmentally sensitive areas. The policy needs to be amended to include these measures to ensure protection of the environmentally sensitive areas. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, at this point, one of the challenges that's out there, and it's not that different than some of the other things we've spoken to, without having good environmentally sensitive area mapping and identification initially, it's really difficult to go to that next step to say you shall protect. I think it's a good principle. It's obviously a good principle. We're suggesting that the first step really is that you identify them before you start to have specific requirements around protecting them. However, the intent of the policy is first identify. If they're identified, come up with a plan to mitigate. And we've suggested that at the area structure plan level, but we have identified the need for the municipalities or the municipal development plans at the municipal level to identify those regionally significant environmentally sensitive areas. So it is in there in that we're saying that but it is specific to what is identified as opposed to a blanket approach.
Peter, you're muted.
follow up, if I may.
Yes.
As the policy is written now, is there any requirement? It doesn't seem to be any requirement for intermunicipal collaboration as it relates to coordination and needs. I guess to the same point, these environmentally sensitive areas. Steve, is there going to be some language in there to include that, or is that going to be excluded?
Yeah, at this point, we don't have it in there. We've left it at the municipal development plan level. And again, I guess the best way to put it, it's a first step. And as that gets piled into a regional ESA database, that allows for that to happen in the future. At this point, though, with the level of information there is, we're suggesting that at this point, it needs to be collected at the MDCP level, compiled regionally, and that would allow for something in the future to be done on a more of an intermunicipal level. The only area where we're really talking about the need for anything specific on the intermunicipal level, and that's with an ASP crosses a boundary, so that within 100 meters of the boundary of the ASP.
And just finally, so we had a lot of feedback from our water and environmental expert and our planning team. I won't go through it, but it was rather critical of some of what was here. But when I read it, I have to go under the assumption that our experts in each of our municipalities will be the champions of making sure that we're doing this in the right way. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair, and yield the floor. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Next, I have Councillor Kara. GC, go ahead. GC, are you still with us?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get out of the chat there. Our experts feel the same way as Mayor Brown's experts in Airdrie. We feel like we're not where we need to be. We think that ESAs are really critical. We understand that we have a little bit of a data gap, but we do not have a sufficient enough framework for the level of collaboration necessary for the transboundary nature of ESAs. And so we're not prepared to support this in principle. We think it needs a little bit more work, and that work would really be about a more robust framework, because the intermunicipal nature of environmentally sensitive areas requires more than these things just showing up in individual MGAs. We feel this is a critical piece with regard to regional planning. And with that, I'm going to do what Rockview did on the last agenda item and refer this back to TAG for more work with that in mind. I would love to have a seconder.
Motion made to refer this item to TAG. Mayor Genung seconds. Before we go to a vote, Suzanne, I have you on the list. You wish to comment?
Thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to chime in on policy 2, and I guess it would certainly support going back for discussion to TAG on that as well. So in policy 2, it states that municipal development plans shall include a map of regional environmentally sensitive areas within areas designated for future growth. And as stated previously by Foothills, our preference is to undertake the environmentally sensitive area work at the area structure plan scale, as it's more relevant, and that the regional scale ESAs be the ones that are included. And it just simply stated, I know we've had previous meetings, but here we are today. Our municipality is large. We appreciate that you are asking for ESAs for the areas proposed for development. And so just to reiterate, this is a huge amount of work on a large area of land. And so it makes a lot of sense to deal with this at the area structure plan stage, as it's manageable, relevant, and certainly works for what the region is asking for sensitivity to this topic and recognition of the ESAs. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you, Suzanne. That's the kind of feedback we were looking for, and that will undoubtedly be helpful to TAG if this motion passes. So I'm going to call the question as I have no one else on the speakers list. On the motion to move this item to tag, how do you vote, Airdrie?
Airdrie is opposed, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Calgary?
Calgary supports this motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Chestermere?
Support.
Thank you. Cochrane?
In favor.
Foothills?
In favor.
High River?
In favor.
Okotoks?
In favor.
Rocky View?
In favor.
Strathmore?
In favor.
Wheatland?
In favor.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I had to step away from the screen and I didn't realize that the motion had been changed. I'm in support of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The motion carries. This item will go back to tag for further refinement. And that completes that agenda item. So we've now completed our business part of our agenda. Our next meeting, let me just get there. Our next meeting is scheduled for January 21st. Although there's going to be a lot that happens between now and then. And so before we conclude here, let me ask, is there anyone who would like to bring anything to this meeting before we adjourn? I see nothing. In that case, thank you all very much for your time this morning. It's been a productive meeting. Wish you all well. This meeting is now terminated.